All right. So my name is Hany Fahim. Today is the story of the Korean hackers. So this was a very, very long time ago. I used to work for a hosting company, and we had this. It was a hosting company that grew organically. So with many organic companies, there's a lot of issues, legacy issues that hang behind. So we used to have this internal search tool, which was basically this one-page app that basically had all customer information with all their servers listed under there. We called it the Control F database because you load the page, you use Control F to find what you need. One day, this tool was online and it was open to the web, and it was only protected by basic auth with a shared password amongst the entire company. Very, very secure, of course. So one day, the tool just doesn't load anymore. It's kind of hung there, and kind of pressing F5, and nothing's happening. Turn around and ask everybody in the office if anybody is kind of messing around with it. They say no, nothing's going on. We had a networking team that worked out in BC, so we had two offices, one in Toronto, one in BC, and emailed those guys and asked them, hey, are you messing around with the systems there? They're like, no, nothing's going on there. So SSH into the server, try to figure out what's going on. There's nothing unusual about the server. There's no load. Everything looks to be fine. So I log into the database server, and this is MySQL. I go into the system and show the process list there, and I notice that there's this massive backlog of queries going on, which is very odd. I kind of scroll to the top of the list, and I notice that there's this one blocking query that kind of looks like a MySQL dump kind of command that's blocking everything there, which is very odd. Emailed the networking team again, and I'm like, hey, is there some backup job that's going on? And they're like, no, there shouldn't be anything going on at this point. Just kill the query so we can get back online. So I killed the query, and everything the backlog instantly cleared, and everything came back online. I didn't think anything more of it. So I went back to my daily routine, and then a few minutes later, it happened again. The system hung again, so this is very suspicious. Go right into the database server, same thing, big backlog of queries. So this time I try to trace the IP. I found the IP of the server issuing the query, and it turned out to be the web server, the one that wasn't doing anything at all. Go back into the server and check it out, and I noticed I traced it down to an Apache process that was running. So I'm like, that's really odd, because this is the simplest web page, it's built in PHP, it's a piece of crap, and it shouldn't be doing anything like this. Go into the web logs, and I noticed that there's all these weird post commands, or post queries being issued, like post to /x. Something very, very suspicious going on. I checked out the IP, and it's some crazy remote IP. I do an IP whois lookup, and it's coming from Korea. I'm like, okay, clearly we've been hacked. It's very obvious we've been hacked over here. So I call up the networking team, and I tell them, block this IP at the border routers, just across the board, just block this IP, someone's hacking us. So they block it. I block the server from any outside access, and I change the password, and I pass it around the office, and we think everything is fine. Clearly, somehow they got in, and they probably just guessed the password, which wasn't very difficult, and they got in and they tried to steal our data. So this was kind of bad, so I started analyzing the logs. I decided to go for lunch, come back, and continue finding how did they get in. A few hours later, started getting some alerts about high CPU and memory from our backup server. And I thought, this is odd, because the backup server is definitely not on the internet. It's protected, it's inside the data center, it's only trusted by our IPs. And there shouldn't be anything logging in. It was a Windows server on top of that, so it's not even Linux, it's not even the same type of system. So I call, ask around the office, anybody run anything crazy? Nothing's happening. Email our networking team, they're like, nope, nothing's happening, man, you gotta go dig into it. So I log into the system using RDP, and if you guys know Windows, you only get 2 sessions in some versions of Windows. Once I log in, I get the message that, you're using 2 of 2 sessions. And I'm like, 2 of 2, who else is using the session here? So I email around, and again, everyone's like, stop asking Hany, it's not us, we're not doing anything funky. So I emailed the networking team, I'm like, can you figure out what's going on here? And they're like, all right, let me take a look at the logs. In the meantime, I bring up Windows Task Manager, and I notice that there's this big zip command that's running, and someone is zipping up the entire drive E, which is the entire backup for our entire customers. There's like terabytes of data. And somebody was running a zip command there. So I emailed the networking team, I'm like, I think we're getting hacked again. I don't know how, but they're hacking, and this thing's not on the internet, so can you figure out what's going on? So we had some really nice Cisco routers, so the networking team logs in, and he's like, yeah, the IP is coming from your office. I'm like, how is that possible? I look around, I'm like, who's running this command? And they're like, it's not any of us. I'm like, okay, before I do anything, can you find out, because our office also had a really nice Cisco router, so I'm like, can you log into that router and find out who it is? So he logs in, he checks the incoming, the outgoing connections there, and he's like, yeah, it's coming from the senior VP's office. I recognize that IP. That's very odd, because the senior VP is actually with you guys in BC. How is the system online? And it didn't make any sense. So he's like, just shut down the backup server so we prevent any more damage. So we shut it off, and we go into the office, and we turn on the screen, and lo and behold, it says, logged in. So how is this possible? I emailed the senior VP, and I'm like, are you logged into your system? I don't even know how, because everything's internal. There shouldn't be any remote access. And he's like, no, it's not me. So he's not logged in. But then he calls me on the phone, and he's like, yeah, just don't tell anybody. But I asked the networking guys to set up a port forwarding rule for me a while ago to open it up to the internet so I can, remote in, because I travel a lot. So I'm like, clearly somebody came in and guessed your password in there, so can we at least take the port forwarding rule off? And he's like, don't touch it, I need it. So I tell him, okay, can we at least change the password? And he's like, okay, fine, let's change the password. So over the phone, he dictates to me the password. I log in, I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna change it to something really crazy. So I'm smashing the keyboard, just getting all the characters in there, and some really, really long string, and he's like, all right, just email me the string, because you're not gonna tell me this over the phone. So I do that, email him, and I tell the networking guys that you got to keep this online. So that's fine. He changed it, logged them out. I go back to my desk and I start looking through the web logs again, because I got to figure out how did they get in there to begin with. And then a few minutes later, the networking guy calls me, and he's like, somebody's back into the system, in the senior VP system. How is that possible? I don't understand this. Go in, and yes, lo and behold, someone's logged in again. I called the VP, and he's like, no, that's not me, man. Something's going on there. I had no idea how they were able to get in, but I told networking guys to take down the port forwarding rule. Somebody somehow is getting into there. In the back of my mind, I'm like, this is very, very odd, because I literally just reset the password, and I sent it to him over email. So I'm like, somebody somehow reading our email? So a few months ago, we just migrated to a hosted exchange, Microsoft hosted exchange system, and these guys are really good. So I called them up, and I asked them, is anybody logging in from the system and reading our email? And he's like, oh, there's no way that's possible. Everything's locked down to private IPs, or to your trusted IPs. I'm like, can you just check the logs just to be certain? So he goes in and checks the logs. He's like, yeah, nobody's accessing it. I'm like, okay, I guess everything is fine. It's just a bad hunch. Go back to my desk, trying to figure out those web logs again. And all of a sudden, a few minutes later, we get all these down alerts. Everything is down. The entire networking's down. What's going on now? Pick up the phone, call our networking team, and he's like, yeah, I think somebody's DDoSing us. And he's like, where are the IPs coming from? And they're like, it's coming from all over the globe, but a lot of them are Korean IPs. I'm like, Koreans again, they must have been pissed because I took away their access. So they're attacking us. I'm like, all right, we gotta just start blocking these IPs. I mean, we have nothing else to do. So we divide up into teams, and each group is a part of a segment, and they're responsible for gathering all the IPs and sending them to the networking team to start blocking them. So after an hour of doing this, like the IPs just keep coming and they keep coming, and every time we block them, it's like they're kind of a step ahead. Every time we block them, they stop using those IPs and they start using a new one, and they just kept adapting to us very, very quickly. So we just tried to keep up with them, tried to go faster and faster, but every time they were like keeping in lockstep with us. It didn't make any sense. So I just had this hunch in the back of my head. I'm like, this is very odd. Somehow they're almost like a fly on the wall. We didn't have any Wi-Fi back then. Their senior VP was he was paranoid, so everything was wired. So it couldn't have been that. So I call back the hosted exchange, the email guys, and I'm like, can you just double check to make sure that nobody is logged into the email? He's like, no, definitely. There's no way it's happening. I built it myself. There's no way that anybody's gotten into it. And I'm like, so can you help me explain how somebody is pretty much following all our steps? And he's like, well, the only thing I can think of is that, when we're setting the system up, months ago, there was some weird forwarding rules that your senior VP wanted to keep in the system, and that I had some trouble getting it up. I'm like, forwarding rules? This doesn't make any sense. I look up our MX records, and I notice that our MX records are pointed to a system on our side, not the hosted exchange, but somehow our mail is getting there. I'm like, the IP is in our range, but I don't really recognize it. So I kind of just hunched, let me just try logging into the system. It turns out to be a Linux box. So I log in and I look at it, and very much so, it's a mail server. and there's DevPot running, and there's XM running, and I also noticed there's Apache running as well. There's a web server running on there. So I'm like, is it listening? Yeah, it's listening on port 80. So just happened to take that IP and I go and I throw it into my browser, and lo and behold, I get squirrel mail. I don't know if you guys have been around, but you know what squirrel mail is. It's the really, really archaic PHP
Oh yes, I
web
use
mail.
it every day.
Sorry? I use it every day? There's squirrel mail running. I don't get it. So I don't ever remember setting this up, and nobody's ever talked about it, but there it is. So I'm like, let me just try my login, see if I can get into it. So I try my login, it's like, no, password incorrect. So I'm like, let me try my really old password, the one when I first joined the company years ago, see if that works. And it did. It loaded up, and there it was. All my email was there. That's the first thing I noticed. Every single one of my emails were there, and there were some forwarding rules in there that was basically receiving it in squirrel mail and then forwarding it off to the hosted exchange. So that was the first thing I noticed. So I took out my BlackBerry, that's how long ago it was. I sent myself a test message, and the test message loads right up. And the second thing I noticed is that the test message loaded up and it was bolded. I don't know squirrel mail that well, and apparently bolded means it's unread. But it was the only message that was unread. Everything else was read there. I'm like, is somebody reading our email? This doesn't make any sense. Maybe it's the forwarding rules. So I keep refreshing. A minute later, my message is read. I'm like, Jesus, they're reading our email. And I go back throughout the history, and the entire conversation, all my conversations about somebody's hacking us, here are the IPs to block, everything like that, they were watching and reading our emails the entire time. And I tried to look at the web logs to see who it is, and of course that server was hacked to bits. They covered all the tracks. It was not reporting a single thing. I couldn't trace any of that kind of stuff. So I call our network guys, we're like, shut that server down, change our MX records for point of the hosted exchange, and let's start, start continuing to block those IPs. So I think finally we found where that source of information was leaking from, and after probably about 6 hours, we finally got all the IPs blocked, and the entire thing was quelled. So there's a few lessons from there in the retrospective. Going back, just a few. Going back in there, we noticed they've been reading our email for about a year, so they're deep into the system, and you can see we found the email where the senior VP is like, hey, open up the firewall for me over here, and there you see this conversation, it's like, hey, it's a little insecure, he's like, doesn't matter, I need it, so they open it up for him. There's his email where he sent himself the password to get inside because he's forgetful, so he sent himself the password, so they got that password. So basically, they were just in there and they had all the information in the world, and they kind of just sat there and quiet until it was time to attack. And second lesson is never, ever, ever trust email, ever. It's just so insecure. That's so